welcome to Diplomatic Channel this week. I am Amarachi Ubani. This week, 51 African heads of state and governments converge on Washington, D.C. with U.S. President Barack Obama in what has been described as the largest gathering any American president has ever hosted with African heads of state and governments.
The U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, where nearly 50 presidents and prime ministers attend from just about all of your countries. It will be the largest gathering any American president has ever hosted with African heads of state and government. And the summit reflects a principle that has guided my approach to Africa ever since I became president, that the security and prosperity and justice that we seek in the world cannot be achieved without a strong and prosperous and self-reliant Africa. And even as we deal with crises and challenges in other parts of the world that often dominate our headlines, even as we acknowledge the real hardships that so many Africans face every day, we have to make sure that we're seizing the extraordinary potential of today's Africa, which is the youngest and fastest growing of the continents.
So this is the moment to take our partnership to the next level. And that's why President Obama is hosting this historic summit. Nearly 15 African presidents and prime ministers are scheduled to attend. We'll be joined by leaders from civil society, faith communities, and the private sector. We've deliberately focused the summit beyond the crises of the moment to envision the future we want and how we can work together to achieve critical goals 10 and 15 years from now.
Nigerian President Dr. Goodluck Jonathan will be at the meeting, expected to further strengthen ties from across the African continent to the U.S. capital. And the meetings take a different format, as there will be no bilateral talks between U.S. President Barack Obama and any African leaders, but the meetings will also focus on issues related to health, wildlife, and power. There will be a small series of small dinners with heads of state hosted by Bloomberg Philanthropy, with the Department of Commerce, as well as a CEO Leaders Forum that will bring together about 200 companies from across Africa and the United States, including companies interested in investing in Africa. But there will be one staple common with President Barack Obama's meetings, and that's a state dinner for African leaders and their spouses. The theme for this summit is investing in the next generation. There will be time set aside to focus on peace and security and democracy and governance, of course, and also looking at how to invest in the future in Africa. A summit will be a week-long event, and Diplomatic Channel will be analyzing the discussions for all of our viewers. But we're also monitoring this week our recent sanctions imposed by the European Union and the United States on Russia. A reason? It all boils down to the role Russia is believed to have played in bringing down the Malaysian MH17 passenger jets on July 17. Our leaders believe Russia provided missiles to the separatist rebels, which was used on that day.
The sanctions by the European Union were announced Tuesday last week. This is not the first time Russia has been sanctioned. The only difference this time is that they are targeted at the country's energy, banking and defense sectors. Previously, Europe had imposed sanctions only on individuals and organizations accused of direct involvement in threatening Ukraine and had shied away from wider sectorial sanctions designed to damage its biggest energy supplier. The new sanctions were coordinated with the United States in the hope that President Vladimir Putin will withdraw support from separatist quest to seize territory and disrupt Ukraine. Ukraine's foreign minister has welcomed the US and European sanctions on Russia and has promised not to attack cities now controlled by pro-Russian separatists.
Now with a clear message that both the US and EU simply speak one voice supporting Ukraine, and it's a good message. For us, it's not, of course it's about establishing law and order. Of course it's about returning to normal life for the people of Donbass, for the people of Donetsk and Lugansk. But we are not going to attack, such cities like Donetsk, because it's about human losses. It's about human life. It's about, at the end of the day, it's about clear idea how we can return law and order in normal life to Donetsk and Lugansk.
Kim Klein has also made it clear that Ukraine intends to give far more freedom and responsibility to the regions. While the Russian government has strongly denied its role in the Malaysian plane crash or the fighting in eastern Ukraine, the Russian community in New York City has reacted differently.
When we're being called partners, and in return we call Russia our so-called enemy, conversation cannot get too far. It needs to be handled on a partnership level. Because Ukraine, with a population of close to 50 million, needs to be addressed. It's 50 million of educated people who need to be guided to a better place.
It's the right thing to do because President Putin, he wants Ukraine, but it's, you can't just go and take over any place you want. They want their freedom, just like they have a right to be their own country. And, if we put restrictions on his oil or limitations to certain Russian businesses, that can affect their economy, I think it will be a wake-up call that he can't just, take over what he would want.
And as international monitors try to find a way into the crash site area for investigation, envoys from Russia, Ukraine and the OSCE agreed on Thursday to establish a safe corridor to the crash site. Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman said agreements were reached at talks in Minsk, the Belarusian capital, to keep open the route used for international experts who traveled to the site in eastern Ukraine on Thursday from the city of Donetsk. Earlier that day, a group of international experts managed to reach the crash site for the first time in several days after fighting between the separatists and Ukrainian troops blocked their previous attempts. They began recovery work at the site despite the clashes. The group is the largest to reach the site since flight Pt.1 was downed. The recovery mission included 70 experts from Australia and the Netherlands, whose countries suffered a big loss of life in the shootdown, as well as representatives of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE.
When we come back after the break is our discussion with one of Nigeria's foremost career diplomats, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Please join us.